Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey. From the Marvel Cinematic Universe comes one of the most popular superheroes of all time, a brilliant surgeon who loses his greatest tools but finds a new direction, all while battling demonic foes on the way to becoming the master of the mystic arts. We're talking about Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange was directed by Scott Derrickson on a screenplay that also included John Spates and Robert Cargill. It was produced by Kevin Feige and released by Disney Studios in the United States on November 4th, 2016. Doctor Strange is based on the Marvel Comics character created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko and is the story of Dr. Stephen Strange, a neurosurgeon who is widely regarded as one of the best in the world. Late one night on his way to a speaking engagement, Strange is involved in a near-fatal car crash that results in permanent nerve damage to his hands. Strange consults with other surgeons in his field and each one refuses to operate, telling him that he will never perform surgery again. After lashing out at ER physician and former love interest Christine Palmer, Strange is forced to confront the truth that his career may indeed be over. But when he hears the story of a paraplegic who somehow regained the ability to walk following a healing, Strange sets out for Kamar-Taj. After arriving at Kamar-Taj, Strange meets Mordo as well as Wong, who serve at the side of the Ancient One, a Celtic mystic that teaches sorcery and is responsible for guarding Earth from extra-dimensional threats. Strange learns of Caecilius, a former student who turned on the Ancient One and now serves Dormammu, a mystical being of the Dark Dimension who seeks to bring an end to all existence. Though he is no longer a neurosurgeon, Strange must find a way to learn the mystic arts and ultimately lead the fight against the forces of evil. Doctor Strange was a critical and commercial hit, earning a worldwide gross of $678 million on a budget of nearly $236 million. The film launched the Doctor Strange character into other MCU movies and spawned a sequel, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, in 2022. Thanks to the ensemble cast, the special effects, and the origin story, Doctor Strange remains one of the most popular films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And that's the lowdown on Doctor Strange. As we record this, it's been 6 years since the release of Doctor Strange. Hard to believe it's been that long. The film came out in 2016. We try to keep the content here evergreen, kids, as you can probably tell by now. But sometimes I date it during the conversation. It just comes up. But the reason I'm leading off that this time is because, man, it's hard to believe it's been that long. Time flies, I'm telling you. It's a silly, overused cliche, man, but it's completely true. And time, very interesting cliche to use here because it's got a lot to do with this movie, obviously, as we'll get into here shortly. As I've said many times here on the 6M before, growing up as a kid, I, along with a lot of other fans at the time, could only imagine a day in which our favorite heroes would be up on the big screen. It was one thing to see Christopher Reeve as Superman. It was another thing later to see Michael Keaton as Batman. But for the Marvel Universe, as we've said before and noted here many times in the past, there was just a whole lot of nothing. So when the floodgates opened in 2008 with Iron Man and Robert Downey Jr., everything started rolling for the MCU, what was come to be known as the MCU. And to imagine, Phil, that not only do we have a Doctor Strange film, we've got a sequel coming, and he's becoming a pivotal part of this universe, as if he wasn't before. But his involvement now is going to be heightened because, of course, Steve Rogers is no longer in the picture. Neither is Tony Stark. So at some point, we'll be thinking about, hey, it's time to hand this thing off to the next generation. But, of course, before we do that, we still have Thor Odin's son running around. We still have the Guardians. And, of course, we still have Doctor Strange and the Hulk. So the old guard are still there. And I would think maybe you could refer to this era that we're in now as maybe a transition period, perhaps. But Doctor Strange is nevertheless towing the line. Going back and viewing the first film again here, Phil, probably for the first time in a while. What's your immediate thoughts coming out of this film? Does it still hold up for you? Do you still enjoy it as much as you did before, or maybe more so now?
At the time when it came out, I thought it was probably one of the most underappreciated Marvel movies. and I think it's aged really well. And it sounds weird to say it's aged well, which this movie is only almost 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think it's aged very well. Just in terms of the stuff that we've seen Strange do since then, and to see him grow into a fully formed character, and you could track back a lot of his motivations as a character and other things to this movie.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in this film and things that and people talk about the Marvel formula. It's the Marvel formula. This is, in so many words. And that's one of the things people used to bash the MCU, Phil, of course, is that, well, it's this movie follows Shang-Chi followed the Marvel. Like, God, stop. Just stop. Like we got to tell the story. We're telling the origin. I mean, how else do you want to do it here? Marvel found a way that works. And, maybe not everyone's in love with it, but you don't have to be necessarily, but it works for them. And is it heavy handed sometimes? Of course it is. I don't know about you personally, Phil, but for me, I never felt a lot of heavy handed stuff in here. Like we get the one quote that he gives, he gives the ancient one that's used back on him later in the film. There's little things like that they stick in here and there that feels like Marvel tropes, perhaps. It just doesn't feel heavy handed to me. I think one of the things, as you said, underrated, the writing, the dialogue in this film. I had actually forgotten how insanely good it is. And it helps to have a guy like Benedict Cumberbatch delivering the lines, right? But dude, the dialogue in this film at points feels heads and shoulders above other things. Like it kind of knocked me back on my heels a little bit how good the conversations are, not just how witty and charming they are, because it is Marvel, but intense, the relationship between him and Christine, which we'll get into. I don't know, for lack of a better term, film, this feels like a very adult movie. Like two adults having issues. These two are not necessarily in love. They're two adults, and he is at the end of his rope, and it's like it feels very adult to me in that perspective, man. I just love the dialogue in this film.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good dialogue and there's a lot of really good acting. I think one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when he and Mordo get into that argument in the Sanctum Sanctorum, and the end of the conversation is him going, "You lack imagination," and Mordo turns to him and he goes, "No, Steve, you lack a spine." It's one of the best lines of the movie.
That's great. That's great. So much stuff in here, and it's like to have actors of these caliber, man. The script, not for nothing. The script's got to be good. Like, how many big name actors, we know who they've gotten, but there's been big name actors say no to these guys. It doesn't happen too often now that they're on fire all the time, but there's been some pretty big names who have politely said no. And it makes you wonder, well, what was their beef? What was their hang up? Was it the dialogue? Was it the story? Was it the script? Was it the idea of having to commit several years at a time of your life and wear a suit? What was it that turned them away? Like, I don't know, man. If you're Cumberbatch or whoever else reading the script of Doctor Strange, you got to be thinking, oh man, this is good to sink your teeth into a character. And I got to lead off with this because I'm gonna hit you with this right off the bat here, man. That we see a complete turnaround for this guy, a 180 for Doctor Stephen Strange in this film. I mean, I submit that maybe this is perhaps the biggest character change next to Tony, maybe even bigger than Tony, maybe that we've ever seen in the MCU. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I feel like his mistakes and his growth are a lot more drastic than some of the other origin movies we've seen. Um, and I did see the criticism that some people think that the beginning of his origin is very similar to Iron Man 1 because it has him being very arrogant and him getting into an accident because of his arrogance. Um, it is similar, but I mean, that's the origin from the comic.
Absolutely. And Tony to me never really felt isolated. I didn't feel like Tony was on an island by himself. Stephen Strange feels like he doesn't need you. He doesn't need your friendship. He doesn't need your help. Tony can't really do anything himself. Like, he's used to being pampered. He's used to people answering the phone and taking things because he doesn't like to be handed things. He needs Pepper. He needs Happy. He needs his entourage. He needs his company. He needs his money. Strange doesn't need anyone. He doesn't need anyone's help. He's completely independent. So I would argue there are some differences here for
I
sure.
mean, yeah, there's clear differences. I mean, Tony being in a life or death situation where he had to build the suit because he also had to build the arc reactor in his chest to keep the shrapnel from killing him. Like that's a huge part of his origin. Um, Strange, on the other hand, made a choice to go and study magic because of what happened to his hands. But, he could have easily done something else. He could have easily, made the choice to continue to be just as selfish as always.
Yeah, and the lengths he goes to in this film. And I love it. I love the contradictory nature of this character because this is a guy that laughed in the face of even suggesting things like the spirit and the mind and healing the body through yoga or spells or wherever else you want to throw at him. And he laughs in the Ancient One's face in this movie. And the same guy becomes the Sorcerer Supreme. Like, he surrenders to it. It takes the whole movie, but he finally surrenders to it. Like, the idea of there's something. What was it she tells him on her deathbed when they're outside the hospital? The one truth that he would never see is that it's not about you. That's, for me, that's the best line of the movie. That was the moment where he realized, wow, like, has anyone ever told him that before? Listen, this, not everything's about you. That nailed it for me.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy the dynamic of him being a man of science and delving deep into the world of mystical arts and ended up becoming basically the most powerful sorcerer in the world.
Yeah, it's a twist. It's a twist because unless you're a comic book fan, you're watching this going, this isn't gonna work. This guy's too much of a cynic. Let's talk about the cast here, man. We've talked quite a bit out the gate here about Benedict Cumberbatch. Best choice, in my opinion, to play Doctor Strange. I sometimes we fantasy cast here on the show, and sometimes we say, no, this is the right person. I don't know who else you could get. Would someone else do a good job? Maybe, sure. Maybe even fantastic. But this guy just looks the part, sounds the part, is the part. I mean, he's got the right combination of ego and cynicism and humor and intelligence. He looks like the smartest Avenger. I mean, even more so than Banner to me. Like, he just looks like he's one step ahead all the time. I mean, I don't know. Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange, man, in my opinion, is brilliant casting.
Yeah, I agree. I was really excited at one point when Joaquin Phoenix was up for the role. Because I was just really curious as what he would do as Doctor Strange, and he's such a good actor. I just had no doubt he was gonna kill it. But I mean, if the replacement is Cumberbatch, then that's not a step down.
Of course not, no. And the issue with Phoenix is he's not going to sign on from multiple films.
Yeah,
He's not going to do it, and I can't blame him in that regard. And plus, he's a bit eccentric. I wonder how he would he play nice with everyone and go on the press junkets and laugh and carry on and be one of the guys, or would that not suit him? Like, you know what I mean? Wonder what the dynamic would have been had he been cast. That's
yeah, I'm
different.
not sure. Yeah, he's just such a good actor that
He
I
is.
was just curious as to what he would do with that role, man. I know he would have done something interesting with it. But yeah, I mean, can't go wrong with Cumberbatch.
No, he's fantastic. Chiwetel Ejiofor is Car Mordo, Baron Mordo, who we only get a taste of in this film. He's this to me, and there's some performances that don't, like Cumberbatch is fantastic. He's acting, and that's cool. He's very good. And Ejiofor is acting as well. But dude, this just feels like a real guy. He's so sincere and he's so matter of fact and he's completely committed to what they're doing. And he just jumps right out of the film to me as being like, oh God, when he goes heel, it's going to be so much fun. Like he's so entertaining and so good to me that I don't want to see him go heel because I like him so much. Talk about Ejiofor as Carl Mordo.
Yeah, this guy is just, man, he's such a good actor. I don't know if you remember this, but like when Whedon was first announced for Avengers, and there were the hopes of us possibly getting Black Panther, he was one of the guys that was on the list to be T'Challa.
I remember that.
Obviously, because he had ties to Whedon because he had been in other projects Whedon had done. So he's one of those guys that I knew at some point would end up in the MCU, and I was just excited to see where he'd end up because, again, I just love him in so many things. He's in the Serenity movie. He's the villain in that movie, and he is fantastic in that movie. I've just seen him in so many other things. He's just such a really good actor. And at first I was like, Mordo, that's kind of a off the wall spot for him, but boy, he kills it in this movie.
I'm going to hit you with this too, as we're talking about Mordo here. I'm kind of on his side at the end. You know what I mean? Like, did we get a satisfying explanation from the Ancient One as to why she's tapping into the dark universe? I mean, did we get, because to me, I wasn't satisfied. I was like, tell me again why you're doing this. Like, to me, she didn't satisfy me at all.
I don't think we get like a very satisfying issue. I think it's a way to lay the seed for a lot of stuff that happens with Doctor Strange later. Yeah. I think you set up that Strange is a guy that is already not a stickler to following the rules, and then you have a mentor that teaches him straight out the gate that sometimes you can go over the rules if it gets you to the result. And I just really like the idea of Mordo being this very rigid character that is like, nope, I'm sticking to the rules no matter what it costs us. The bill always comes due.
Oh, what a great line.
He's just great. And it's hard to disagree with him, but that's what makes him such a compelling character. And that's eventually what's going to make him such a good villain is because he believes he's right. And it's hard to argue with him because when you look at some of the mistakes that Strange has made since his first movie, it's kind of like,
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. You're onto something there for sure. Listen, Caecilius, doesn't it feel like they both have the same argument now against the Ancient One?
Yeah, I mean, because he didn't understand what Caecilius already knew,
right,
until the end of the movie, until he finds out what she was doing, until he sees how reckless Strange is. He has a point, but it's hard to argue with the results of Doctor Strange ending up being right and saving the world.
Oh, of course. No, yeah. I like Caecilius was dead wrong, obviously. But like Mordo, yeah, until he does what he does to Benjamin Bratt's character, which is horrifying. But until that moment, I'm like, yeah, maybe he'll be okay. It's going to work out for the best. He's going to go, meditate somewhere and he'll be fine. Then he does that. And I'm like, yeah, no, he's turning heel. So the heavy of part 2, I'm sure. Rachel McAdams as Christine Palmer. She don't have a whole lot to do in this film, but what she does is good. It's very good. She's, dude, to share the screen with Cumberbatch as strong as he is, especially as Stephen Strange, she holds her own, in my opinion. They're boxing, and she is taking them on the chin and giving them back just as hard. Like, I love her, and she's freaking great. I think she's an asset to this character and to this story, and I'm sure she'll play a huge role in part 2, and I can't wait to see it. But man, again, for me, because you've got any actress in Hollywood, sure, okay. But seeing her do this, I'm like, nah, this is good. This is exactly what you need. Like, this feels, without saying, well, I wonder if they date in real life. Well, I have no idea the backstory. Don't really care. but man, they feel like a couple in this movie. They just feel like they're so connected. I think she's great in this.
Yeah, I feel like she definitely helps Cumberbatch to anchor the first 30 minutes of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like all of the stuff in his normal life could easily be boring, but I feel like she and him are so good together, especially after the accident. Um, I feel like those are, those are the parts of the movie that kept us interested until they jump full, head first into the magic stuff.
Oh yeah. Oh man, what he says to her is it when I mean it just guts you. She says there's other things that can give your life meaning. He says, like what? Like you? And she's like, this is the part where you apologize. He said, this is the part where you leave. I'm like, oh my God, he's a cold-hearted bastard. Like that's what I was speaking about earlier, Phil. Is like that bit of dialogue is not a comic book. I love you so much, darling, but I've been injured at all. That sounds like two adults talking to me. It doesn't sound like a rehearsed scene. Like that's adult conversations are hurtful and they suck. And it's never all's well that ends well. It is, I'm hurt, so I want to hurt you. And it's, you say things you instantly regret or you regret later. God, man, that whole scene is great. And I think it sets up the dynamic between those two. And as I said, I think she holds her own, particularly in that scene, man, for sure.
Yeah, I do think that was one of the better scenes in this movie, because he's just such a jerk in the scene.
Yes.
And she holds her own. It's not like she runs away. Like, how could you? And like runs out the room crying. She just like stands firm and just gets up and tells him off and leaves.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great stuff. And she got tears in her eyes when she does it. Oh man, it's awesome. I can't say enough good things about her. I can't wait to see her again in this too. Benedict Wong, who again his part is not huge, but we got to see more of him in Shang-Chi. Just a little bit, and we'll get to see more of him later, I'm sure. But man, he's just so fun, and the dynamic between him and Strange is so good. And he introduces himself and he's like, and you are? And he says, Wong, like Adele, like Beyonce. And he's having fun with him. He's like, do you ever smile? It's so fun. And so the payoff comes at the end of the movie when he laughs at his joke and he's like, can't stop laughing. It's so good. Man, he is. And dude, Phil, plus we just found out in the latest Spider-Man film that he is the Sorcerer Supreme. Like, I can't wait till they dive into that story in Doctor Strange Part 2, man. What do you think about Benedict Wong, of course, as Wong?
I think he's a great addition to this cast. I I think one of the issues that I have with this movie is the lack of Asian characters.
Hmm.
And that's, because the comic had so much Asian influence. And I mean, even this movie, there's so much Asian iconography in this movie. And, the controversy around them whitewashing the ancient one. And so it was good to see at least one really interesting Asian character on the cast, and I thought Wong was a great character. Every time we see him again, he's a fun addition to the movies he's in. He kind of has this running gag of being a guy like, I don't want anything to do with this, and going through a portal and leaving. He's done that in like 3 movies now, and it's funny every time he does it. And I don't even know if it's an intentional running gag, but it's kind of one of those things as Marvel fans where we're like, well, if Wong's going to do anything, he's going to mind his own business.
Right. Live to fight another day. That's what I say. Not to just, flip past him, but you mentioned the lack of Asian characters. So we got to talk about the 600-pound elephant in the room. Tilda Swinton as the Ancient One. Let me say this off the bat. She's great. Is she miscast? Perhaps. Because as much as she's a really, really good actress, I'm not saying I didn't believe her because my God, she sounds like a college professor in this film. She's intelligent, highly intelligent, delivers her line as if she is completely over this. She sees 5 years down the road, already knows what Strange is going to become later. She's dialed in completely. She speaks like someone completely at peace. There's no issue with her acting for me. I just don't know if I buy that she is the Ancient One. And maybe I'm jaded because the Ancient One in the comics is from Tibet and it's a man, which I'm not too concerned that they made it a woman, but the fact that it's a white woman, you know, and dude, there's conversations about why it's not a Tibetan man, something about the Tibetan sovereignty debate, which is online, and that they were in a no-win situation because in the comics he was portrayed as an Asian Fu Manchu, like a stereotype, and so they didn't want to go that route. But it's like not casting an Asian American actor at all. I mean, what's your take on all of this and on Swinton as the Ancient One?
I think Tilda does a good job. I think she is convincing as, this
Yes.
mentor character and this all-knowing, person that, of course knows more than she's telling. I think she does good in some of the mystical stuff. Um, it's just a shame that they did not go with an Asian actor though, or an Asian actress. And that's not to say that the Ancient One has to be Asian. I get that they had to walk a very fine line the same way that they did with the Mandarin, where it's like you don't want to use a stereotypical character from the comics. You want to, improve the source material. But there was a way to use an Asian actor or an actress and not make it stereotypical. You didn't have to come in and do the Fu Manchu stuff. You didn't have to do any of the Yellow Peril stuff. You could have made this into a interesting Asian actor. Even if you had like someone that wasn't necessarily Tibetan, you could have gotten someone Chinese. You could have gotten someone Korean, something. Um, it's it's an odd the choice to not go with someone Asian for me, especially because everything we've seen of the Ancient One in the comics is that he's Asian. He's always been Asian.
Right.
Uh, and I just think this was an opportunity to cast an Asian actor or actress and do something interesting. And I think it's even more glaring because there's so much Asian iconography in this movie. They still have him go to Kathmandu. There's still all of the Tibetan temples and everything. And you've got the head of this thing being this white woman. It's just a weird visual.
Comertage. I'll always love that name. And dude, they've got explanations. Dude, I'm reading the debate right now. In their minds, they didn't have a choice. Because like if you go with an older Asian, this is what I'm reading. An older Asian woman would invoke the dragon lady stereotype, while a younger Asian woman would be perceived as exploiting Asian fetish and be a fanboy's dream girl. He wanted to avoid the stereotype of a Western character coming to Asia to learn about being Asian. And I'm not saying I disagree with anything they said because I kind of get where they're going with all this. It makes sense. But the fact that they call her she in the film, the fact that Mordo says that she's Celtic, to me, don't say any of that. Leave all that out. Don't call it she. Just keep calling her the Ancient One and don't give her background. If you really want this to be an androgynous character and not have it's a mystery who this person is, we don't know where this person came from, how old this person is, then commit to it. But it's like they didn't commit to it, you know?
Yeah, and I understand everything that they're saying about not wanting to play into Dragon Lady stereotypes and some other things. That's why I'm saying they had a tough decision to make coming into this thing and trying to do something with Asian representation. I think that they fixed the issue, or at least did better with Shang-Chi.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it is just disappointing that their answer was, okay, well, let's just not use anyone at all. Let's not even try and give a better representation of Asians. Let's just go, well, she's just a Celtic white woman.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's not to say that she doesn't work in his movies. I just think it was a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
And I of course, I can't speak to why it might anger some Asian people or possibly offend them because I'm, of course, not Asian. But I just think it was just a bit disappointing.
And it, to me, this is a bigger discussion than the Iron Fist thing. Danny Rand was not Asian. He never has been. Now, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but when people got upset about, Iron Fist not being Asian on Netflix, I'm thinking, but he's not Asian. Well, no, Tom, he should be. And I'm like, okay, then create a different character, which they've done now in the books. And I do that. I'm all good with that. But this idea that we have to take, well, no, this character has been around since the 70s or however long it's been. But like the Ancient One is different. The Ancient One was a Tibetan man in the books. And like you changed it to a white woman. So to me, that's an entirely different conversation.
Yeah, it's outright whitewashing. But see the thing, like we always had this conversation about can you change a character's race and how much about race is integral to a character. There are certain characters I believe where their race is a part of their character. Like Steve. Like you cannot make Steve Rogers a man of another race. A big part of his character is that he is a blue-eyed, blonde, white man.
Yeah.
And there are other characters that are like that. I kind of feel like Danny Rand is one of those characters as well. I don't have an issue with them casting an Asian man to play Danny Rand, but a big part of Danny Rand's character is he is a white man that is out of place, being in Kunlun, and he brings a certain amount of aloofness to this character and being, in Eastern society instead of being in Western society, that you don't quite get that same character dynamic from an Asian man. I mean, now you can change the story of Danny Rand and give him this different dynamic, kind of like what you did with Shang-Chi of an Asian man going back to his roots. Sure, but that's not who Danny Rand is in the comics.
Right. Yeah. You're essentially changing everything. It's the old conversation of why does a 7-foot black man not work as the kingpin? There's so many reasons why it doesn't work. There's reasons why it does, but in my opinion, the negative outweigh the positive. I just don't know. And we've talked about that on the Daredevil episode, that it's just not a good look.
Yeah. I just think certain characters work better. Well, not even work better. I just feel like certain things about their character just tells me that they're white. Right. It's like Batman. I feel like Batman is a white man. There's so many things about his character that just say white man. Right. And that's not to say that you cannot have black characters in Batman or do black characters in or recast other white superheroes, but I do believe that certain characters, their race is a part of their character traits, and it doesn't work when you try and allocate those same character traits to someone of another race.
Yeah, and I think Blade's a good example of that too. I don't think Blade works as a white guy. I just don't feel that at all.
Yeah, absolutely not. Like I don't. There's just certain characters that you don't really need to see them as a different race. Like we're never going to see a white T'Challa, for example. Like that'd be just outrageous.
wretched, horrible idea. Yeah, never. Yeah, if you're going to recast it, I mean, okay. And I still submit that if anybody could ask Chadwick what he would want, he would say, you can't let this character die. It means too much to too many people. Like, so I would agree with that. But no. A white guy has no business. And it has nothing to do with the name. It's the heritage. It is the character. It's the sense of belonging, the sense of where the characters come from. Yeah, I know you're right. It makes no sense at all. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark 6M Podcast sent you. So, I didn't get too hung up on the Tilda Swinton thing. I'm a Marvel guy. I've not made any secret about that. So I have collected a ton of Defenders back issues over the past year for whatever reason. I just got into a kick of Defenders. And I've got Doctor Strange in my long boxes, but I don't know how many I have. I don't think it's many. So I never really got hung up on all the Ancient One mythos or anything. I knew what the deal was, but again, for me personally, it didn't really ruin anything. But I'm with you. I do see it is a missed opportunity. We've talked about Caecilius. Mads Mikkelsen can just basically stand there and not say anything, and he is freaking fantastic. There's just his face, those eyes. Holy God, this guy has a face for this. I mean, if he had not, like, he started out as a gymnast, I think. I'm thinking, man, this guy, yeah, he made the right decision, because, like, he's an actor, man. Like, you look at him and you're like, God, he's got a story on his face without even opening his mouth. He's just one of those guys. Great choice for Caecilius. He fits in perfect. I think he checks all the boxes, man, in this movie for sure.
Yeah, I think one of my only gripes with this movie is I wish that Mads would have gotten more to do.
Yeah.
Because I think he's such a good actor, and I feel like he didn't really get a chance to stretch his acting chops a lot here. I mean, because really, I feel like most of this movie is setting up other characters to have bigger roles in the movie. I feel like the Ancient One kind of has like a bigger role in terms of, you know, not being a bad guy, but like one of the biggest impacts on this movie is her decisions. And I feel the same way with Mordo. I feel like really the big bad of this movie is kind of Dormammu, and you know, Caecilius is kind of just a puppet for Dormammu.
I love hitting you with this. And you know what I'm going to hit you with? I hit you with it every episode we do that involves a story with a villain. What do you think about the villainous plan here? Do you think that it makes sense? Does it make sense for him? Is it flimsy? Is it weird? Are we just trying to get to Dormammu and this is the only way to get there? I mean, what do you think about his motivations to get to the big bad of the film?
I do like this as a way to introduce audiences to Dormammu through Caecilius's character, because I feel like people are going to remember the Dormammu scenes more than they remember Caecilius, really. But I also like the idea of Caecilius working as a way to point out the Ancient One's mistakes, and as a way to get us to this point of Dormammu promising Caecilius things and him buying in. And of course, it's you're selling your soul. Like, you're selling your soul to a demon, and of course he's not going to give you what he claims. He's the demon.
Right. And the bit where he and Strange meet for the first time, and he has no idea what Steven's saying when he calls him Mr. and he says, Doctor, Mr. Doctor. And he's like, it's Strange. He goes, perhaps. Like, he has no idea what's going on. And even though it's a bit of comedy, it doesn't feel like comedy because he has no idea what's going on. So it's just more of a straight-laced throwaway joke. I think he's a good opposite for Strange. I feel like he holds his own against that character. Like, he's a villain that's worthy of Doctor Strange. And man, he feeds Doctor Strange's lunch to him in the first couple of times they cross each other's path. I mean, Strange really doesn't have an answer for him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, Caecilius is clearly the more experienced sorcerer, and so for most of the initial fights, like, he's losing pretty bad.
Yeah. Yeah, it again, he doesn't really know what's going on. So yeah, I really like him in this, man. As I said, I think he holds his own. I'm a big fan of the guy apart from this film too. So I just love I love a lot of things about him. It just feels like he fits. Um, we haven't really talked very much. I mentioned Benjamin Bratt as Jonathan Pangborn. What's the chances we see this character again in part two, you think? Or
I
do you
think we
think
kind
we're
of got a definitive end to his character arc.
yeah.
I doubt we see him again.
I just wonder if there'll be a time when we see him and Strange has given him back the magic where he can, walk again. I just thought it was oh, it guts you what he does to him. Like he takes it away from him like he's not hurting anyone. But to Mordo, it's like, no, no, you're messing with something we shouldn't be messing with, and there'll be a price to pay for this. I wonder if Mordo's going to be proven right in part two.
Yeah, I wonder what is he gonna be doing in part two? What is his story arc? Because the trailers make it seem like he reluctantly has to work with Strange again, but I don't know if I buy that.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it'd be interesting to me to see that things that he warned about in this film in some weird way actually come to pass. I think I'd be okay with that, where he's like, "You see, I tried to tell you, but it won't be maybe exactly what you think it is. It'll be like a warped version of it or something." I don't know. It's interesting. Um, what about Doctor Strange's character arc in this film? And we talked a little bit about it earlier about how he changes, about how he evolves. Do you buy as a character where he is at the end versus where he is at the beginning?
Yeah, I think him understanding his place in the universe and understanding that this is all bigger than him. I mean, because we see him go through two different changes. He goes from being a man of science to being a man that believes in mystical arts as a means to an end when he's just trying to heal his hand, and then we see him get an understanding of what the Ancient One and the Sorcerer Supreme actually act as, and him basically saying, "I'm not here to fight some mystical war. I'm here to heal my hands." And he kind of has to go from that to being, you know, the protector of the New York Sanctum Sanctorum. Um, I, I think that he does both transitions pretty well, and I think his getting to the end of the movie and him realizing that he might have to get his hands dirty and make some mistakes and do some things that his master, taught him. I think that's a good transition from him, especially because he's arrogant enough to tamper with certain things based off of what we learned about him early in the movie.
Especially in Spider-Man, he had no hesitation. He's like, "Sure, I'll help you make the world forget that you're Peter Parker." Like,
Yeah, sure. I'll cast a spell that has long ranging ramifications on the entire multiverse.
yeah.
Why not? I'll give the time stone to a man that wants to kill half of the universe. Sure, why not? It'll work out because we're only one mistake away from this not working and us all coming back and eventually beating him.
Dude, did you put together that the time stone is in the Eye of Agamotto until the end? Did you I'm not gonna sit here and say that I knew that, but at the end when Wong revealed, I'm like, oh my god, that's the time stone. I can't say that I put that together.
When he reversed time the first time with that apple, I kind of guessed
Ah, interesting.
because that's not what the Eye of Agamotto is used for in the comic.
Hmm.
It's not used as a device to uh, control time.
I thought the eye in the books was like used as a weapon. You know what I mean? Not like a I don't know what to call the time stone, but that doesn't feel like a weapon to me. It feels like a ploy or a tactic, you know?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. The Eye of Agamotto in the comics. Well, first of all, it's not green. It looks different. That's what makes me, because I think the Eye of Agamotto. Isn't there two different ones?
I think you're right. For purposes of the MCU, it would make sense that it's an Infinity Stone.
Yeah, of course.
Because it gets us there. It gets us to Thanos, which all of this is about Thanos, kids. All of it. So
if I remember correct, doesn't the Eye of Agamotto reveal the truth or something like that?
That's sounding familiar. It's been years since I read Doctor Strange.
I think
you're
that's
right.
what it is. Because it's an eye. It's kind of like
Right.
the Eye of Thundera. Like it has to be an eye. It has the way of seeing something. It's an eye.
The all-seeing Eye of Thundera. Yes. Yes. Don't get me started. Sitting here, be talking about Mum-Ra and Chitara and stuff, man. So yeah, I'm down for that. Yeah, I love the fact that they've got to get the seeds planted for the Infinity War, which makes total sense to me. So I'm okay with that. I love his evolution. I'm with you. I think that by the end of the film, it does make complete sense, even though there's a part of me that thinks he still snickers at some of this stuff in his own way. Like, even though he's seen with his own two eyes that all of this is real, there's a part of him that still wants to be in control. And maybe that's why he was so quick to cast the spell for Peter. Because, I got this. I'm totally in charge. But the truth is, all these masters are at the mercy of this realm of the magic. Like, they're just merely guiding it and using it here and there, but no one's really in control of this stuff. I just get this notion, this feeling that this thing is more powerful than anyone could possibly imagine, which I think is what we'll see in part 2. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah, and I think his transition from where we see him at the beginning of the movie to the end makes perfect sense. And I think it sets him up to be, a larger role in the MCU.
Yeah, I think he's, especially now that Tony's gone, the why, the voice of wisdom, and like this, who's the smartest guy in the room now? Well, it's Banner. Well, is it Banner or is it Stephen Strange? I mean, it's, you could make the argument there was 3 smart guys in the room. Now there's 2. So, we'll see how it plays out. Have a product or a service that you want to get out into the world? Always wanted to try your hand at podcasting but don't know where to start? We've got you covered. Pod for Hire is a podcast production company that offers turnkey services to fit your needs. We produce your show from start to finish, allowing you the valuable time you require to focus on your established clients as well as prospective clients. We pride ourselves on delivering a top-notch product that will set your business apart from the rest and give your company the exposure it deserves. For more information, give us a call at 1-828-800-9880 or email us at info@podforhire.com. Pod for Hire. We take the work out of podcasting. What do you think about the Inception stuff, the building folding? First of all, it looks magnificent. Let's just call it what it is. But it looked magnificent in Inception too. I think this film takes it a step further, and it looks even better, in my opinion. What do you think, dude? And we've done the Matrix episode where we talked about these tropes being used and used in more than one film, and they become the thing to do. I mean, it feels like this is going to become the norm because we saw it again in the Spider-Man film. So what do you think about this Chris Nolan stuff being adapted to other stories here?
I really like the visuals in this movie. It's one of the most visually appealing Marvel movies, in my opinion. It's definitely one of the most distinct looking Marvel movies. And I think all of the Mirrorverse fights look really, really cool. I was kind of curious when I saw the trailers of, okay, this looks cool, but how does this play into the use of magic? And I think especially the fight that he has with Caecilius outside of the Sanctum before the Ancient One steps in, it's so good because there's so many moving parts. It just looks great. And to your point, the Mirrorverse fight we see in No Way Home is one of the best parts of the movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it's one of those things for me that like you just accept that a trend is going to be used in other things, and I'm okay with that. I didn't lose a lot of sleep over it, and like, oh, I've seen this before. I just love the way they do it, and it would make sense in a film of this nature. The mirror universe, which I love that concept. There's so many cool things in this film. Visually, it's visually striking. Cinematography in this movie is, and the special effects especially are just freaking fantastic. I mean, it's such good stuff. It's one of the things that sets the Marvel Universe apart from a lot of other so-called universes out there in film. I mean, just that dedication, that commitment. Like we're gonna go full out. We're gonna go hard on this special effects. We're gonna make this look as real as we possibly can. I love that stuff, and I again the commitment that it takes to to have a vision, to see it through to the end, and make you feel like, oh, Robert Downey's been de-aged. This is a young Robert Downey. Like we know it's not. It's not really a young Robert Downey, but holy God, he looks amazing. It's that commitment to it that just we're going to find a way to make this work, and it's going to look fantastic. I just think Marvel does that. Not that they do it better than anyone else, but I just think they've found a niche, and it works for them. We've talked a lot about Strange's evolution in this one, and him being the arrogant surgeon. It kind of smacks of Dr. House to a certain degree, which I love. And the fact that like no one's as good as he is, and he lets Dr. West know it early on in the film. I mean, that's really good stuff to me too. That's a fun scene. And again, super confident. The accident that takes his hands from him. Mm. You tell me, Phil, how is this dude not dead? I mean, is this one of the comic booky moments that were like, oh, come on, that guy would have been dead the moment that car hit the guardrail? Like,
Yeah, I mean, they made the crash as over the top as possible. I mean, he went through the guardrail, it flipped over a few times, all the way down the hills, landed head first in this thing, and then tipped over into some water. Yeah, this was it was the most dramatic car crash.
And how did he survive in a car submerged in water, by the way?
Yeah, I didn't understand that the first time I saw it. I was like, yeah, he definitely should have been dead.
She says we didn't find you for a while, and apparently she used a term. Apparently, the time for the nerve damage had passed. So, in other words, if they'd found him during that time frame, they probably could have saved his hands. This dude is walking after this accident. Like, to me, your hands would be the last thing on your mind because your back. Talk about no spine. He should be a paraplegic. Yeah, it was a little far out, if I'm being honest. For me, it was a little far out too, but I mean, we got the point across. The bitter irony of the Marvel universe, and this is not just in the movies, kids. Does Peter Parker's life become better once he gets superpowers? No, it becomes worse. Um, does Tony Stark's life become better once he gives up the defense contract and tries to do the right thing? No, it actually becomes worse. Like every time characters in this universe try to do the right thing, they do the right thing for the right reasons, and things get worse. Like Doctor Strange, for all of his faults, I mean, like his life doesn't get easier, but like, I don't know, dude, just this idea of this guy is who he is because of his hands, and they define who he is. Well, let's just take his hands away from him and see what he does now. Like, that's a very Marvel thing to do, in my opinion. Like, let's just stick it to this guy and see how he recovers and see how he reacts, man. It's one of the more ironic twists on this guy. Like, maybe it's good his back wasn't. He doesn't need his back to do surgery. He needs his hands. So, like, it's a bitter pill, but it makes sense for Marvel, right?
Yeah, I really like the idea of, like you said, him reminding everybody every time he gets of how good he is as a surgeon, and just how, because you can always study, right? You can always learn something. It's kind of like when I was growing up, and you know almost everybody in my neighborhood wanted to play basketball, right? You can't really teach athleticism, but you can teach fundamentals of the game, like how to shoot, how to dribble, and all that stuff. And with him, he was, the one thing you cannot take away from him is logic, right?
Hmm.
If you put some books in front of him, he can study and be the smartest guy in the room. And he also, doesn't he say that he has photographic memory at some
Yes.
point in the movie? Yeah, so you put a bunch of stuff in front of him, he'll memorize it, he'll study and he'll be good. And he goes from being the best in his field to entering a world where he knows nothing.
Yeah, good point. He's a fish out of water. Even Mordo says when he shows up at the doorstep that he was in his place once when he was disrespectful. And Strange gets this look about him as if he'd just been scolded. And he realizes, oh, I'm kind of douchey. Like, no one has ever really told him that to where it impacted him at all. Not even Christine, who he's obviously shared a bed with before. I mean, even coming from her, it doesn't impact him at all. Like, because he's been living in Stephen Strange land for so long that the people in the outside world don't affect him until he loses everything. Then he starts feeling it when he didn't feel it before. It humbles him, right? I mean, eventually it humbles him.
Yeah.
That again, to me, it just feels like a very Marvel thing to do. What's working for this guy? Let's take it all away from him. Let's make it worse. And all right, let's give him this thing. He could do magic. Cool. Now his life's that much harder. Like it's doing the right thing in the Marvel universe doesn't fix everything, kids. It just makes it harder. Like it, we've covered Spider-Man here on the pod before. It's just, Peter Parker's life sucks. And anyone that says it doesn't is dead wrong. So, something to be said for the writing here. I love how complex the characters are and how even the characters with the best motivation and the best reasoning just can't do anything right. And I love that because it makes them human. I just think that works in so many different ways. We talked about special effects. I got to hit you with this. The scene where he meets the Ancient One for the first time and she busts him out in the astral form and then takes him on that trip. It looks like a Steve Ditko comic come to life. I mean, if only that Steve had lived long enough to see this. My God in heaven. Dude, what a great moment. And to me, it's a highlight of the film, getting to see what all these masters see all the time. And it's his first taste of it. He gets to see Dormammu in this vision also. Dude, this is some great CG here, man. I love it.
Yeah, the small bit every time I see it when I watch this of him, you know, flying through, what looks like the multiverse and all of this, seeing all this stuff for the first time, and then he stops for a brief second and he sees a butterfly and tries to touch it, and then he just keeps flying through all this stuff. It just looks so great.
I wonder if that's put in there intentionally in terms of like butterfly effect. Like, don't touch it because if you harm it, I wonder if that had anything to do with it. But I love it. Like, I'm with you. It's a very striking visual.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed, but there are a few scenes in this thing that tie back to the multiverse and the timeline.
Mm.
When he is flying through all that stuff and he sees all of those lines connecting, it looks a lot like the multiverse.
Mm.
When they're standing outside in the rain, talking in their astral form, and they have like that lightning that comes down and it's slowed because they're in the astral projections, it looks like the timeline splintering.
Oh, good call. Very much so. I did pick up something when he is having the vision of all this, the multiverse and stuff. Do we see Ego? Because I swear I think the planet that he sees in the distance is Ego, the living planet. Am I crazy?
I didn't. If we did, I didn't notice it.
Maybe I'm just making it out to be something it's not. But yeah, I'm looking at it right now. But yeah, dude, I think there's more here than maybe we know, and hopefully they'll dissect it in part two. I didn't know until reviewing notes for this episode that is Benedict Cumberbatch voicing Dormammu. I had no idea.
Yeah, I knew that.
That's so cool. I have literally walked into a room before and said, Dormammu, I've come to bargain. And I've done it more than one time during the course of a day. And by the third time, it's like, all right, we get it. It's not funny anymore. Stop. But it's hilarious to me. I can't help it. So, what a great freaking moment. What a great use of the time stone. It's so good. I pop every time because the second time he does it, Dormammu goes, "You've come to die. What is this?" Like he realizes, wait a minute, what's up? What's this crap? Dude, that is such a great line. What a great moment. Strange. And dude, this is a great callback to everything he's been told his whole life. Everything's about him. And now he's going to get dealt back pain, suffering, because he's feeling dying every time. He's legit dying, but then he's dying over again. Like it's the character coming full circle, isn't it? Where like now he's doing the what did Steve say? You're not the guy to lay down the wire for the rest of us, And by God, if Stephen Strange isn't doing it, I think it's a great way to round out the character at the end.
Yeah, I think that depiction of the dark dimension is so good. You talk about looking like something straight out of a Ditko drawing. Is all him standing in the dark dimension and talking to Dormammu, it all just looks perfect. His use of the time stone to keep going back and forth every time he kills him is great, and trapping Dormammu in time because he just never experienced time before. It's just brilliant. Um, I I'm always kind of on the fence with his plan because his plan is kind of reckless, and I almost want to call it stupid, but his plan is to keep killing himself in order to convince Dormammu that he's never going to let him out of this infinite time loop. Um, but that could have went awry so easily. that could have not worked. Um, but I suppose that's the point of the movie of him going full circle of um not believing in a logical plan, because logically, if he had thought too hard about that plan, it would have fell apart on itself. And so him coming full circle of just understanding he had to just believe that it would work, and just taking a hunch. And we see him do that a few times. We see him do that in No Way Home. And of course, we see him do that when he ultimately tells Tony that it was the only way, because he had already seen that if he gives him the time stone, on a hunch that it would work out in the end.
I love that we got the setup for this earlier in the movie where he was scolded for using it to begin with. He was scolded like you don't just do that. This has ramifications. Doing this has an impact. Like, you could be stuck in a time loop living the same moment over and over and over again. You can't escape it. Like, to me, you're right. It seemed like, well, why, the thing's on his around is that why couldn't Dormammu just take the stone? But when he cast the spell, it almost seemed to me like, well, he's got the circles around his arms and whatnot. At that point, can you even remove the stone from him? Is he protected? Because if he's protected, then Dormammu has no choice but to let him out, because then he can't. I guess I'm trying to sit here figure out, how does he stop him?
Well, Dormammu doesn't know that he's doing it. He doesn't know how he's doing it. He doesn't know that he's using the time stone. It's how I guessed it worked. But I mean, even that, I still think one of the coolest visuals of the movie is him rewinding time while they're running up the street trying to get to the Sanctum Sanctorum of Hong Kong. And everything is rebuilding itself around them, and they're having this whole fight with Caecilius and his henchmen, and everything is, rebuilding around them. And you get cool stuff like the henchman getting caught in that fish tank. It's so dope. Every time I watch it, it's so cool.
Again, I go back to the idea of this movie should have won something based on visual effects alone. That's fantastic. I don't know that I've seen that in a film before to that extent of, we have no idea what happened, but we're seeing the reverse, so we can put two and two together to figure out what happened. Like, fantastic. Again, commitment to the craft and to the effect. Oh my God, it was so good, man. So good. Very creative scene. Very inventive as well. When we saw the city street in Hong Kong, for a second I thought, is this the same street that Ronan stood on in Endgame? And I thought, well, it can't be, because wasn't he in Tokyo?
Yeah, I don't think he was in Hong Kong.
Because I mean, I'm looking at that city street. I'm thinking, God, that looks very familiar. It's probably not the same place. But I thought, man, that would have been cool if it had it been the same location. Um, yeah, the colors in this film, again, the effects, and I don't want to make this all about the effects because, as we said from the jump, man, the acting in this film is freaking fantastic. The fact that Strange pitches such a fit that he killed someone, like it's a really, really big deal to him. Like he's not a murderer. These hands are supposed to heal, and I've taken someone's life, and when Mordo kind of doesn't care, you're like, I kind of see his point because like it's us or them, but at the same time, I think maybe they're planting the seeds for his heel turn later, which would make perfect sense. What do you think about this surgery scene, the astral projection, and then the fight? Dude, for my money, that's one of the best scenes in the whole movie.
Yeah. Yeah, on the Mordo thing of him not caring about killing people, it's such an interesting paradox because we see that he's so rigid about everything else when it comes
Yes.
to magic and, protecting the sanctity of magic. But at the same time, he doesn't care about taking a life. Um, yeah, it's such an interesting paradox.
Absolutely.
But yeah, the whole fight in astral plane while Rachel is trying to save his life is so good. Um, I think them, going back and forth and him scaring Rachel and not her not understanding what's going on. It looks like he's dead. I think all of that stuff is great. I was really surprised the first time I saw it that he like legitimately got stabbed.
Yeah, I didn't see that coming either. And it's funny because like he says early in the film about the accident itself. She says no one could have done better. Talking about his hands, he says I could have done better. Like again, dude, back to the ironic part of this character is the one guy that could have fixed him is him, but he can't fix himself. So maybe the whole movie is about him fixing himself, which makes sense. Um, yeah, I love the surgery scene as well. And I again, like you, I didn't see the stabbing coming, but I think it adds a great dimension to it. The fact that he, was almost killed here, um, makes perfect sense. They mentioned the Sorcerer Supreme in this film a couple of different times, and you know that he's going to end up being the Sorcerer Supreme, obviously. By the time the Ancient One dies, that kind of lets you know that there's a void there that hasn't been filled yet. Um, what about the cape? We haven't talked about the Cloak of Levitation. It's almost like another character in this movie. It's so good.
Yeah, I love how they handled all the artifacts in this movie. We see Mordo use a few artifacts early in the movie. Um, and I mean, we even see like the wand of Watum at one point. They don't really call
Mm.
it that, but that's what it is. Um, and I mean, I really like how they handled the cloak. The cloak, sometimes the CG for the cloak looks kind of off, but I really like how the cloak looks when it's on him.
Yeah,
There's so many cool scenes like him walking out of the room and it just flying around and draping itself on his shoulders and
that's
just
good
how it
stuff.
looks. I mean, when we first saw the trailer of him coming up the stairs and staring out of the iconic window of the Sanctum Sanctorum with the cloak on, it just looks so cool. Um, I'm a big fan of Strange, and once they started making Marvel movies and really going into other characters other than the ones we see all the time, Doctor Strange was definitely one of those that was like, I really hope we get a live action Strange. And so some of this stuff of him walking around with the cloak and the Eye of Agamotto around his neck, it just looks perfect. I mean, he looks like dead on, especially at the end when he has to finally wear the yellow gloves. Just looks dead on.
And, we've said before on the show that you have to nail Steven Rogers. If you don't nail Steve Rogers, the Avengers doesn't work. Like Chris Evans has to be the right guy. It has the story has to be right. The acting has to be on point because that character could have, and no I'm not talking about John Cena the guy, John Cena the character in WWE. That's what it could have been, where you're like, oh my god, this is not good. But like Evans pulled it off, and it was so good, and it's still good. It always will be good. Like, you have to nail it. But for me, if you don't nail that, once you nail Doctor Strange, at that point, I don't know how you screw anything else up, because to make this guy relatable and believable and feel like a real person after the just the fantastical stories and his own background, like, at least you can say that the guy that Steve Rogers is in the books wearing combat fatigues and army boots, and then he becomes Cap. That's something you can relate to. But this guy is in the mystic realm. Like, all this stuff could have been laughed off the screen. But once you prove you can nail Strange, can't you, if you're Marvel, can't you say, I see that, we nailed that, we can do anything? Because this could have tanked as well, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. I think you once you get into magic, you lose some people, and I do know a lot of people that didn't really care for this movie, and that's why I said it was underappreciated. But I do feel like once we got a fully fledged Doctor Strange, where it's not him learning how to use the magic anymore, and you get to see him do all of these cool things like Infinity War, of just like taking on Thanos by himself, and even to a lesser degree in Endgame and creating all the portals. Or, I mean, man, even in Dark World, I feel like once we see him, as a confident sorcerer, he's just so much better.
Yeah. And he's got the yellow gloves on, which is so cool. Because I don't think he wears them again, does he?
I don't think he wears them again in the Avengers movies.
Oh man, that's a missed opportunity. I would hope that would become like part of the gear at some point. Like, these gloves have meaning, that they represent something or something. That's cool. Yeah, he is a fully fleshed out character, and God, I'm trying to think. I don't know the answer to this because I haven't looked. I'm trying to think of how many movies. Yeah, Doctor Strange, both Avengers films, right, and the Spider-Man film. Are we talking 4 movies he's been in so far? Is that right?
I guess 5 when you count
Is it
Dark
5?
World. Well, not Dark World, I'm sorry, but Ragnarok.
Right. Yeah, you're right. That's 5. You're right. 5. Interesting.
Are we missing one? I don't think we are.
And he is. You hear these things about, well, so and so is going to age out of the role, or how long did you expect Chris Evans to keep that body? I mean, we hear things like that. We've had discussions like that before, but Strange is covered up. He's a little older anyway. Like, he could conceivably play this part for years and he would still look good. And the costume's always going to look good. Like, he doesn't have to be in any kind of real shape to do it. I mean, this to me is unlike any of the other characters in the MCU. Like, in terms of, you could just continue this thing. If, as long as he's willing and the story's good, we could see him doing this 5 years from now.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, the older he gets, it doesn't hurt the character because the character is an older character.
Right. Plus, we know that he's coloring that beard. Didn't we learn that in the Spider-Man film?
Was he coloring it, or was he using the beard guy to cut it?
Oh, that's right. Yeah. For some reason, I was thinking we saw a Just for Men moment.
Oh, I think he did have Just for Men in there. I'm not sure,
so.
But I know he had that beard guy in there for sure.
That's good. Yeah, well, dude, there's fine lines on that. That is expertly crafted goatee he's got happening there, or whatever we're calling that thing. Expertly.
Awesome facial hair, bros.
Yes,
that was a panel from an Iron Man comic.
It's good stuff because he and Tony both. I got to be honest with you. I'm gonna, and I know Tony had to go when he had to go, and it made sense, and I don't fight that. But I'm gonna kind of miss the dynamic between him and Tony because it was entertaining, and it was, the man of science versus the man of the mystic arts. Like, that's an interesting dynamic to have in the MCU.
Yeah, it does suck that we only got it for one movie. But I thought what we got with them together was really good.
Yeah. Yeah, that was because him showing Tony his index finger during Endgame, is it to say, this is the one I saw. This is the moment. Like you have to do this. Oh man, it's gut wrenching just thinking about it. Yeah, to me, they hit it out of the park in this film, and I come away from very few films saying they're perfect. I'm not suggesting this film is perfect. I do think it checks all the boxes. It does everything it needs to do. I do think the cast is fantastic. I think you could argue the Tilda Swinton thing to your blue in the face, if that's something you want to go, the road you want to go down. But I don't know. What do you think? And I don't have any spoilers for part two. Do you have any bold predictions for the character in part two? What do you think could happen here that we're thinking about, or that we're going to see in this movie?
I think that because when you watch the trailer, they say that the biggest threat to the multiverse is you, and we get that swerve of seeing the Strange Supreme from What If, and I don't think that he is going to be what Mordo was talking about. I think Mordo is going to be talking directly to Strange of, it's you, all of the mistakes you keep making, and all of the ways that you're tampering with things that you don't understand. That is the biggest threat to the multiverse.
Yeah, because it looks like we are getting the Dark Doctor Strange from the What If series.
Yeah, and I do think that Mordo is still going to end up being one of, if not the big bad of that movie. Even if he's not the big bad, I still think that the making it look like they have to work together is probably a red herring.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I know what's going to happen here, dude. I hate spoilers. I hate knowing things. I want to see as few trailers as I can possibly see. Like we've seen the teaser for Moon Knight, and I don't want to see any more. I just want to see the show, again, that looks fantastic to me as well. So, again, kids, we don't know when you'll listen to this. We'll probably release this before Doctor Strange Part 2. That way we can kind of whet people's appetite for the character and for the movie and everything. So we'll see what happens. We didn't mention the Stan Lee cameo. He is on a bus reading Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley. A book that was written in 1954. And I'm sure that has some significance to Doctor Strange. Yeah, so interesting moment. But he only has one line. He just laughs. He says, "This is hilarious," which is kind of a cool moment, but he doesn't really interact with anybody. But yeah, this movie, was there anything that maybe you were hoping to see in this film that you didn't get to see, or did it do everything it needed to do for you?
I mean, I was hoping we would see Dormammu, and I was glad that we saw Dormammu in some scene. Because Mordo is such a big villain, it's kind of like coming in your first movie and not using Sinestro right away, but setting up Sinestro. I really like the way that they set up Mordo. I was kind of hoping to see more of him in a big bad role, but I really like the way that they handled him.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's laying the groundwork. I think you're seeing his motivations for turning later. And as we've said before, and it's become the thing to say now about villains, it doesn't matter if it makes sense to you. It only has to make sense to them. Like to them, they're not the bad guy of the story. They're doing the right thing, which I think is what we'll get from Mordo. What do you think about Mordo in part two? Too early to tell? Too early to know what's going to happen?
Yeah, I feel like he's 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 gonna stay firm in his beliefs. I don't see him coming out of this and going, well, maybe Strange was right. No, I think that he still feels the same way about there being too many sorcerers.
Oh man, can't wait to see what's going to happen. It's going to be a really good flick, I'm sure. Well, kids, we didn't dive extremely deep on this one as we have been known to do here on the show, but I think we got pretty much all the high points. I don't, and talking about characters that we may or may not see in part two, I do assume that we're going to see Rachel McAdams. I have a sneaking suspicion that her character does not fare too well in part two. Maybe I'll be wrong. What do you think? You think we're going to see the last of her in part 2?
That would be interesting if they went that route. I'm not sure because we do get those brief glimpses of her, and it looks like she's getting married. Is that what it is?
Maybe, which is one of the reasons I think we're going to get the dark multiverse Strange, is that he's, because in the What If cartoon, wasn't it that, what was it that happens that he keeps trying to correct?
It's that she dies in a car accident.
That's
she's
what it
in the
is.
car with him when.
That's right.
He had the car accident that damages his hands.
Right. Wow. Yeah, man. I just got this suspicion. I've not read anything to this effect, but it just feels like maybe we're going to see something bad happen to her in part 2, which I hope I'm wrong, but we'll wait and see what happens. Yeah, visually stunning, excellent story, great acting. I think this is a high mark. Where do you personally rate it in terms of the MCU? And to date, we're talking about 27 feature films. So you don't have to rank it by number. Is it in your top 10 of Marvel films?
Oh, that's tough.
Right?
I don't know if I would say it's in my top 10, because that top 10 is, there's so many really good Marvel movies at this point. I don't know if I would put it in my top 10, but I would definitely say it's one of my favorites. And every time I watch it, I'm surprised how much I enjoy it. Yeah, I don't know if I would say it's in my top 10, but I would for sure say it's one of my favorites.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. I'm just watching this scene again where he says, you should have stolen the whole book because the warnings come after the spells. And that's the line that makes Wong crack up. So that's really good. Well, let's see if we can put a pin in it, Phil. What do you think? What's your last word on Doctor Strange?
I think Doctor Strange is one of those origin movies where you had the tough task of getting fans to kind of go on this journey and go into magical stuff after you took them to space and all these other places with the MCU. And I think Marvel Studios did a great job with it. I think they cast the right guy in a role. I think that they made the movies distinct enough from everything else they've done. I think it was a home run.
Yeah, home run. Best way to do it. Best way to say it. Absolutely. We gush over Marvel here on the show, kids. It's just something we're into. I just think they do a lot of things right, and I think Doctor Strange is. It's got a lot of these films have a special place for me, but for some reason this film really does. I'm a big Sherlock Holmes guy, so I love the work that Cumberbatch does as Sherlock Holmes. It's really, really good stuff, and to see him flourish in the MCU and become one of the best characters, the best actors. No surprise, but just a joy to watch for me personally. So I love it. There you have it, kids. Can't wait for part 2. As we said, we'll probably release this before part 2 comes out. So we can go back and you can go back and listen to this and relive the film and maybe watch it again as you're listening to the show, that kind of thing, before part 2 hits. And then we can all experience part 2 together. And I'm sure we'll probably do a 6M on that as well. But until it gets here, for the time being, that is Doctor Strange. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.